Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blabbit. If you're tuning in for the first time, this is where we invite experts to come on and speak about their topics of expertise, share some of their insights, and share some of their secrets. And I have to let you know that, as always, Blabbit is sponsored by Open Doors, your corporate communication platform for employee engagement. It's great to see everyone here on our show. My name is Paul Geiger. I am a public speaking consultant out of New York City. My job is to make people more persuasive and to make them feel good about doing it. Good to see you, Glenn. How are you?
Good to see you, Paul. I'm well. How are you?
Great.
Hey, everyone. My name is Glenn Ingram. I've been working for the past 2 decades, helping people listen better, ask better questions. Yes, we're talking about sales. It's not a 4-letter word. The more you listen, the more you can probably help people find solutions. Good morning, Heather. How are you?
I am great. Thank you, gentlemen, for having me today.
Our pleasure.
Share a little bit about yourself, if you would.
Sure. I'm Dr. Heather Browne. I am a psychotherapist in California, 27 years, and I do very similar things to these two gentlemen here. I just do it in the arena of people and relationships and families. I'm also an author and a speaker and delighted to be on board.
Well, it is great to have you here, Heather. And I just want to clarify something right in the beginning. I know we've been promoting this show as the topic being living with joy, which I know is something that you do talk about. It is something that you do advise your clients about. But maybe because I've been born and raised in the New York area, when I hear live with joy or find the joy in your life, it sounds a little bit like, are we supposed to take all of our challenges and struggles and stick our head in the sand? How do you possibly adjust your mindset so that you can actually experience and embrace the joy? What would be step number one in your expert opinion?
Step number one would be to realize that you're not living it as fully as you can and wanting more. And when you're in a place of wanting more, you have the opportunity of either feeling the lack or trying to figure out what you can do to cultivate more. So that would absolutely be step one, realizing there's something other than what you're experiencing right now.
Okay. All right. And I'm sure there are many more steps after that. We'll get to those in a moment.
There are, and I am from California, so a lot of times some of the ways that I speak and think can seem a little granola, can seem a little airy-fairy, but truly there's a lot of wisdom behind some of the sunny skies, and there's a lot of truth to, you don't ever want to negate your reality of what's going on. You need to feel the hard and the tough, but there's also ways of looking at that can take you to a different place.
And when you're in New York, there's probably about as many steps to get to being happy as there is in the Empire State Building, right?
I think so, which is a great thing. That means you can keep getting higher and higher and higher and higher and higher to that peak.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask this. I was just on a kind of a private one of these yesterday, and kind of the topic was, talking to people that maybe have had challenges in their life. And I know in my experience, my biggest obstacle, and Paul's heard me say this many times, is the 6 inches between people's ears. They're self-limiting factors. They're what if this happens, what if that happens. So what kind of advice would you give to someone to get started to get out of their own way and learn to be instead of worrying about what if?
Well, the first question is, do you like the thoughts that you're thinking? Do you like the way that you're feeling? And if the answer is no, then there's something that needs to shift to give you something other than what you're thinking or what you're doing. And then you get caught in the wrap of people saying, well, this is all that I know. And then I challenge them. And I say, well, when you were born to this world as a baby, probably knew how to cry, probably knew how to eliminate bodily functions. And that's about it. And everything else you have learned. So I challenge you that it can be different than where you are right now, if you're willing to do the work and apply it in a different way and just decide, do I like what I'm currently feeling? The old saying, like, how is this working for you, is true. Is it working for you? Are you pleased? Are you happy? If not, like, this is your life, guys. What are you going to do about it to change it up?
Mm-hmm. Now, are limited beliefs always a running away from fear? Is it always motivated by a fear of some sort, or am I looking at it in a short-sighted way?
Oh, what a great question. I'm going to say no, they're not, because sometimes that is really all that we do know. And we're not necessarily running away from something, but that's all that we know. And it might be a limited belief because it is very narrowly focused. But there's the place of, if you can open it up a little bit, can you move? If you're not able to move and you say, no, this is all that it can't be anything other than this, then fear and control, right? It would be those.
Hmm.
I'm always a person that's always trying to, I guess, maybe the consummate student, trying to learn more to try and better myself, for people around me, stuff like that. One thing that I've been trying to learn and study a little bit more than last year is CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. Do you have much experience with CBT? Do you have any opinions on that? Because I've tried to help some people or advise people to take a look at that, because for me, it's been interesting to identify and understand why I'm doing something, because if I understand why, it's easier for me to change and do something different.
It's at least 50% of the work that I do, because
Okay.
there's a lot to, let's explore your whole childhood and where did it come from. And that's all very, 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 very important. And then you need the next step, which is, what are you going to do about it? I give the analogy. If you come to me and you say, Heather, I'm an alcoholic, I'm going to say, oh my gosh, that's an incredible insight. And if I say, what are you going to do now? And you say, go to the liquor store and buy a 6-pack, I'm going to say, your insight isn't helping you. So awareness with action is the key. And cognitive behavioral really encourages a new action other than just the experience.
So, in terms of our relationships, would you say that it is easier, or it is preferred to make changes in our personal relationships prior to our work relationships, or do you make the change on any level and then look for the change in the other relationships that you have? I think I already know the answer to the question, but I threw it out there.
Well, I'd love to hear your answer. You want to give it to me first, or you want me to answer?
Okay, all right. As I was posing the question, I'm thinking, well, obviously it starts with your relationship with yourself. That would be the first thing. So you riff on that.
100%. It starts with you. Now, you can change in any aspect if you choose to first. But if you're going to start with yourself, that will then empower you. And it also moves you into a place of exploration, openness, willingness. And as you change, you will change in all of your relationships. And the only one you truly have control over is yourself. So you can influence everything else. But the more you focus on you, the better it's going to be. A lot of people struggle with self-love. And I had an awareness, which I think you'll like, Paul, that we focus on, why can't I love myself when I don't love myself? And when I say, like, I just need to love all of me, my head goes to, well, I don't like my feet, or maybe I'm a little old. And we start to look at all the places we don't love. If you pull it back further and say, I'm going to focus on loving, I'm going to focus on being of love, it opens it up. So same thing with relationships. If you pull it back, how do I look simply at relating to myself and the world? It pulls it back, and then you're more open and accessible to work and to move and to shift and to truly care about others. If our focus is, I need to work on this relationship, I need to work on my job, it externalizes part of it. And until you're really clean with yourself, externalizing allows you to blame the other or look for fault in the other, instead of really looking at yourself and realizing, what am I bringing here? Because I'm stepping into this relationship. It's not this relationship on its own. So am I bringing the best me? Am I giving this relationship the best opportunity, or am I setting it up with a negative viewpoint? I'll tell clients, if I tell you the person you love the most in the whole wide world is outside that door, how do you feel? And if I tell you now that the person you hate more than anybody else in the world, or dislike, or have a tough time with, is outside the door, how do you feel? So our head already goes somewhere, which changes the way we feel. And if you own that, then the more you allow yourself to take care of you, to be in a good place with yourself, you can then go through that door and meet whatever you meet in a better way, instead of already creating potentially a negative construct.
Isn't that really the root of all of our relationship issues? Whether, and when I, from like Paul's questions, when I hear work relationships, personal relationships, I think sometimes we create our own maybe tunnel thinking of those, because a relationship's a relationship. The more honest you are, the more vulnerable you are, the better the relationship's going to be. But when we have internally issues with ourselves, I'm not pretty, I'm not smart, I have this issue and that issue, until we can come to terms with that and like ourselves, do we really ever have a relationship where we let anyone in or we like someone else because of all the obstacles we've built in our own brain about our own self?
You're completely speaking up my tree, exactly. And when I've heard the viewpoint, you can't love others until you love yourself, I really had a hard time with that, because I think I was good at loving other people always, not so much myself. But the more I really focused on, I don't have to think I'm amazing and incredible and phenomenal, but I do need to accept myself as I am. The more that I do that, the easier it is to accept everybody else. So it really does start with us. And if you think about it, how silly for us to think it doesn't. Like, this is our life. Of course, how we live our life, think our life, feel about our life is going to impact everything we do, because we're really not anything other than us. So it's so funny that we've decided it's so different. But when you let yourself love your experience, enjoy your experience, look for joy in your experience, it does change everything. And then it gives people the ability to interact with you without a push or a shove. Enjoy me or don't. Whatever you choose is good. I want you to be good with you. And most people are pretty good with that.
Now, for the more jaded observer of this conversation, they would probably say, and again, I guess I'm playing, my screen name should be Devil's Advocate today.
Good.
But for the more jaded observer of this conversation,
New Yorker,
right, it would sound like, wow, that's a lot of ego, loving yourself. But, and there's the but, in my experience, I find that my triggers come when my responses are too ego-based in relationships. In other words, when I take things too personally and not allow it to be deflected, or recognize, wait a minute, that's my ego feeling that way. That's my ego. And lately I've been able to stop myself from, well, you have to feel it in order to recognize it, but I don't act on it. I try to hold back in terms of the interactions based on my recognition that that's just my ego talking. That's just my ego making me feel that way. Is that something you encounter on a regular basis?
Yes. And people talk about needing to kill their ego, which on the one side, I understand the thought behind that, but we really don't want to. Our ego is what makes us human. And when you realize the ego really is there as a guide to show you, wow, this is how I think. This is how I feel. This is what I believe. Ooh. There's also a difference between loving yourself in the sense of, I'm pompous, I'm phenomenal, I'm incredible, you're less than me, and I'm just going to enjoy being in this body, being in this mind, being in this life, not deciding it's any better than anybody else's. But this is the only body I have. This is the only mind I have. I can either say this is mine and I'm going to work with it as best I can, or I can hate myself. And for me, it's a whole lot easier to say, okay, this is me. Let me enjoy this as much as I can. And as my ego pops up, say, ooh, there's so much in the mirroring that I think we're becoming more and more aware of right now, which is, when I feel anything negative with you, the reason I'm feeling it is because it aligns with something inside of myself that I don't like. And you'll know this is true because sometimes you'll see somebody do something, you'll think, dear Lord, like, what the heck? I would never do that. And you just kind of laugh. And other times someone says something, for me, it might be judgment. And I kind of go, ooh, that was really judgmental. And then I have to go, Stop. You're judging them for being judgmental. Ugh.
Well, exactly. That is the Wayne Dyer quote. If you spot it, you got it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and kind of going back to what we talked about, the what ifs and what ifs. I know there were a lot of times when I was training salespeople and trying to help them get better at their careers, when they would say, well, what if the customer says this? And I would say, what if they don't? Well, what if this happens? And I would say, what if it doesn't? Have you heard from the customer? No, they must not want to do this. Have you asked them? I mean, so how do you go about getting through to people to quit having predetermined ideas of what's going on? How to simply ask someone, how to have a conversation, and let whatever be will be, instead of having your predetermined what's going to happen, and you are already going to self-sabotage yourself because you think something negative is going to happen.
Well, clearly you're brilliant at this because you just answered all of it beautifully. But yes, could it be anything else? And you can also go the one side. Okay, let's go that side. Let's go catastrophic. You use this for anxiety. Okay, so they're not going to buy my product. Okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're not going to buy my product. Okay, then are they your customer? No. Then what are you going to do? I need to find another customer. So you can what if it to the very end. You're not going to die. So you might have to do a lot more work. So what if it to the end so you can lessen it? And then what I do a lot of times, because we tend to hold on to negativity much more so than positivity, is say, sure, that could happen. And how about you give me 5 other possibilities? Their phone's not working. They're out of town. They're sick. They have to ask their boss. Like, what are 5 other possibilities other than I blew it on the last phone call? So when you open up the door, could it be anything other than you're believing it is? And then you can also go to the place of, well, do you like the thought that you're having? No, they hate me. They don't want to buy from me. Is that a thought you want to have? No. Do you want to leave that on the table, or do you want to see if there might be another possibility? You might be right. They might hate you and it might be over. But if not, do you want to leave that sale on the table? No. How about you go back and say, hey, I haven't heard from you for a while. Just wanted to check in. Is there anything that I can do? Is there anything you need more information of? I have had so many people come to me where they've reached out. I've reached back to them. I haven't heard. I wait a couple days and I just say, just wondering if you found a therapist or if you have any questions I can answer. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you reached back. I didn't remember who you were, or it didn't work out, or yeah, could we talk now? You don't know their reason. The worst that can happen is you're right. And then you move on.
If I can follow up, Paul, because I've told them for years, I've never been swung at and I've never anything thrown at me. So the worst they're going to do is say no. Okay. Now, from what you just said there, you triggered a question. Why do most people retain the negative to the nth degree instead of the positive? And I ask this because I've had some relationships where I could say 500 good things about you. I say one negative, and that's the one thing you remember. Why do some people's brains focus on the negative?
Some people's brains?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we all do, but some people definitely are more caught there than others. I think I, at this point in my life, really way more on the positive slant, but I'm also, I work on it a lot. There's a couple of reasons. Part is that negative hurts. So negative gets in deeper, and pain is a bigger motivator than pleasure, truly. And that's why so many sales go to the side of, you're hurting. What's going to happen in 10 years if you don't fix this? Because we tend to work a little bit harder on pain than pleasure, and fear. But there's also another side that I heard recently on a Ram Dass YouTube, which I just fell in love with. And what he said was, the baby's born thinking they're perfect. Everything's just fine. And then they start to engage with the caregiver, and they start to pick up social cues. When I smile, you smile. You're nicer to me when I'm of like this. Then we move into the school system or the social system, and it's very evident. You react to me better like this. I want to get that reaction. So therefore, I now need to be like this to get what I want from you. And if you go deeper, then it kind of splits it into 2 places. I need to be like this for you to like me. And below that, really sadly, is who I am is not good enough. And when we start to get that message, which I think for most of us started pretty darn young, we hold to that. I'm not good enough unless you approve of me. I'm not good enough unless you value me. We start to base, and certainly with social media now, we start to base our level of who we are as a person largely upon the response we get from others. That's why we have the people pleasers. That's why we have such a challenge with self-esteem, because you determine my value. You determine my beauty. And there is a truth in that. Like, I'm not going to look at someone who, in my opinion, is just not a pleasurable, enjoyable person and say, well, no, you think you're amazing, so therefore I'll think you're amazing, and like, I'll marry you and you'll be my partner forever. There is a place of me saying, no, this doesn't work for me. But there's a difference between this doesn't work for me and that's labeled you. What I tell clients is, don't say this out loud, but when you hear a comment from someone that's a criticism, a critique, add for you or to you. Those pants make you look fat. To you. I don't like the way you said that. To you. You're driving too fast. For you. And then it separates it from being a global, this is a truth, and this is your experience with me. If we can give ourselves that truth, this is your experience with me, just yours. You're important to me, so I'm going to care about it. But I'm not going to feel like I can't be myself ever because of what you think, want, desire.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's the mistake, is telling someone that's your opinion. Because when somebody says that, that's not the response they want to hear. They want to know that you're processing in some way, or listening, or acknowledging that that is the way that they feel.
Well, let me give you a nugget, Paul. So then say that, but with a little bit different phraseology. Thank you so much for giving me your opinion. You're really important to me, and I value that. I will absolutely honor that because that's so important to you. That allows you to do both. Own, okay, this is yours, and you're important to me. And how beautiful is that?
Right. Yeah. Now, with so much to be considered here in terms of making an adjustment because we feel that something is not working for us or we're not happy, do you find that clients experience a reluctance to take action because we are considering our responses to existing relationships? We are considering creating really new relationships. Is there a little bit of a reluctance to take action? I would think that, you know, you're boldly going where you have never gone before, so to speak.
Yes, and that in its own right is to be honored. People look at resistance as something that's bad or negative. I'm going to have a talk about this. Resistance is actually an incredible teacher to us. When there's a resistance, what it's saying is something isn't laid right, something isn't as it should be, something feels unsafe, it needs more lubrication. It's a message that don't proceed quite yet, figure something out. So when someone is hesitant, when someone is resistant, when someone is pulling back, I honor that. And I say, ooh, I feel you pulling back. What's going on right now? What would you need to stay with me? Or what can I offer you so this feels safer? Or sometimes, how about we stay right here? Let's just breathe. I'm just going to be with you in this place. And you let me know when you feel like you can step in further. I'm very, very mindful of feeling people's energies. Resistance is fantastic. And what I say is, oh my gosh, we're about to have a huge breakthrough. Get ready. Because when we step to that next, stair, you will have done it. So let's honor where you are right now. Make certain we do whatever we want to do here to help you find out what you need to find out, because there's something really important and you're pulling back. And then they don't judge themselves of, oh my gosh, why am I scared? They're like, oh, I've got something here I need to figure out. Yeah. And maybe it's just, I don't have anything more I need to figure out. But when you honor the person where they are, that allows movement. And we do it the opposite way. We shove the person out of where they are, pull them to where we think they should be, and then say, now be good. And it's not, because they haven't learned what they've needed. It's not motivated by themselves. They move into a fear place or a judgment place, and they don't feel safe with you. I'll tell people, if I need to cross a rope bridge with you and you're really confident and I am completely not, if you grab my hand, run me across to the other side, and you say, see, there you did it, easy peasy, you did it, you're going to think I'm capable, and I am going to be petrified. It'd be way better if you say, I'm right here. Take a step when you want to take a step, and don't take a step if you don't want to take a step. I can go before you. I can go next to you. I can go after. We have to empower ourselves. And our world disempowers and then wrongly inflates others. And all of our power is within ourselves. And when we realize that, then we don't have to challenge anybody else. We can just really work on who we are and say, like, I'm going to be good with me, and I'd love to be good with you.
We spoke earlier again about work relationships, personal relationships, and things like this. And it may be a poor analogy, but I always have said that we always wear different faces. My face at work is to hold you at arm's length because I have an insecurity about myself. My relationship with different people, I'm holding you at arm's length because I have insecurities about myself. Until maybe we get a little bit older and realize I know I messed up. I know I'm not perfect. And as we lower those guards, maybe quit wearing those faces, it's amazing how all these relationships become better and stronger. So how do you help people kind of be comfortable with who they are so they don't try and put on an act depending on which situation they're in and whom they're speaking with?
The person would need to be at the place where they're willing to do that. And some people never are. And I would talk about, well, let's talk about that insecurity. Like, what would happen if you showed up in a different place of you? Years ago, when I was on a phone with a client and my kids would walk out by the door, they're in their mid-20s. They would sometimes say later on, you're on the phone with the client, weren't you? And I would have been, and I'd say, how'd you know? And they said, oh, there's a certain tone you have. I'm like, really? I have a therapist tone? Now there is a professional aspect. This is Dr. Heather Browne. May I help you? When I answer the phone, I'm not like, hey, you got me. Who's this? I don't do that. But most of the time now, people wouldn't really know who I'm talking to, because I'm really comfortable with who I am in most places. It does get shaped a little bit if it's performance or interview, because there are differences. But to me, I would say, well, what would happen if they saw that side of you? What would happen? Sometimes it's not appropriate. I'm not going to be in this interview telling you, dirty jokes, because I don't know your humor bases and your audience might not approve of that. So there is a place of being respectful of who you're with and trying to honor them. But when there's a place of insecurity, what I say is, I wonder if there's something there that we can really help you walk through so that you really can share that. And what I say to people is own it. Own it. I had a problem with someone using this device right before this podcast. And so I reached out to Paul and I said, gosh, I hope this works, because this morning I had a problem. I've never had it before. I didn't feel insecure about doing that. I wanted to let him know. So there's a place of letting someone know. If you're not competent in sailing, you don't feel comfortable or speaking, one of the things I say is own that. Gosh, I hope this goes well. Do you know what? This is my first public speaking. I hope you guys will like me. Give me lots of feedback. There's lots I need to learn. Let's go. Versus I need to pretend I'm perfect. And then you get stilted. So when you can own, I'm not really comfortable here. Would you give me some feedback? Most people want to help people when they're truly genuine and open to the other person's viewpoint. The challenge is when we try to pretend to be something we're not. And most of us have pretty good BS, radars. And we're like, yeah.
Well, you're right. Most of the time, we don't stop to realize that people who are listening to us, most of them are pretty empathetic listeners.
Yeah.
They really are. We really are. We all are. We do want to see people succeed in the same way that we shrink when we see someone having a really difficult time getting up to speak in front of people and feeling ill at ease and self-conscious. I want to go back to the idea of changing our relationships. And this is probably something that you encounter on a regular basis, but it feels like a fresh thought in my mind, and it probably runs pretty deep. And that is when you realize that you need to make a change in yourself, in your relationship, in the way you see the world and the way the world sees you. Do your clients, or does anyone ever feel guilty about doing that work and sort of sabotaging the relationship because of the change? I understand it has to be done, but does that cause anyone to short arm the work that they need to do, feeling guilty about changing this relationship? Or is it something you have to do the work, but take all of your relationships along with you every step of the way, or will that sabotage your change?
Great
Which of
question.
those two?
Yeah,
I'm sure it's a little bit of both.
it is. And great question. You can't really take all your relationships along with you and make the change because each relationship is unique and different. So you hold them all like within you, but in the sense I can't make the change that my mom would want, my dad would want, my sister would want, my clients would want, my dog would want, you would want, and also take care of me, because it's all different. I tell people, if you go to 10 people and say to them, what haircut should I have, or what color hair should I have, you're going to have 10 different ideas, most likely. And unless you're going to keep going to the hairdresser every single day, like, you can't please everyone. So there really is the place of finding out what works best for who you are, because that's your authentic self. And there is a place of saying, gosh, I'm so sorry, but I do need to do this to be okay for me. And this is going to change our relationship. And I hope in a way that works for us, for you. And I'm going to really be mindful of that and careful of that and attentive to that. But sometimes the way someone needs to change doesn't allow the relationship to continue because someone chooses that. And that's sad to a certain extent, but then it's also beautiful to a certain extent, because you can say, you've helped me realize that I haven't really been who I am to be. And I will accept the fact that you don't want to continue this with me beyond as I change into this, but I do feel this is who I am to be. So I thank you for helping me have that. People will say, if they have a relationship and it ends, they'll say, I failed at all my relationships. And I say to them, well, okay, because you haven't found the person that you're going to live with for the rest of your life. On one hand, you could say you fail at every single one. But how about, once again, we flip it to the other side and we decide we succeed. You got what it was that you wanted from that relationship. And then at some point, it didn't work in a way that you could work through with the other. So isn't that a success to know that? We aren't really that well suited. We don't really help each other in the way that we want. Okay, we're great together sexually, but day to day, we don't work that well. That's great information to have, but then incorporate within yourself and go forward. But yeah, relationships end because somebody changes in a way that the other person doesn't enjoy, doesn't appreciate, or isn't invited to be a part of.
So do you still leave, in a situation that evolves in that way, do you still leave the door open, or is that leaving yourself vulnerable to falling back from the change that you've started to initiate?
Well, I think there's a huge caveat to that, and that would depend upon what's going on. If I was in a domestic violence relationship and I had been beaten and wronged and hurt, and I finally empowered myself to get out and say, I do love you. I will always love you, but I can't be in relationship with you. the person could do a lot of work on themselves and do a lot of anger management. They might come back to me and say, oh my gosh, I totally got it. Can we please step back in? I'm not going to always say I must say yes. And especially after an affair, there's two things that I always tell clients. It's many things I always tell clients, but one of them is, first, you both have to be willing, and then you both have to be able. And the second one takes a little bit of time for the person who's been cheated on to figure out. It doesn't happen often in my work, but it does happen from time to time where we've worked together for a couple of months and the person just isn't going to ever trust the person again. And it's
Now, you
important
mentioned
to
this. Sorry.
say, what do we do with that? Do we need to walk away, or do you stay in a relationship where the trust really isn't there?
Right.
Now, a few moments ago, you mentioned failure and failure and failure. It seems like, in my experience, a majority of people focus on the failures, and a small percentage say, no, it's like Edison with the light bulb. I didn't fail 100 times. I learned 100 ways not to build a light bulb. So why is it predominantly in our nature to focus on the failures instead of not worrying about them and getting them out of the way so you can achieve success?
It goes back to that negative construct that we have. We tend to like to beat ourselves up, and we tend to like to blame other people. And if you live in kind of a more growth mindset, then yes, it could be a failure, but a failure actually teaches you so much more than success. Success means it worked. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. Failure means it didn't work. So now I can figure out what are the other options. And sometimes it works. Like if I made vanilla ice cream, it worked. And I could say, that's it. Well, then I would never try Rocky Road. And Rocky Road is my favorite with almonds. So success doesn't always mean it's the best. It means it worked. Failure means it didn't work. What can I learn from this? And a lot of it, I think, is also just the way we are in the world, the school system, A, B, C, D, F. There's a grading quality, pass or fail. And so I think we tend to look at things as good or bad when it's both. If you're stubborn, you can say that's bad. Sometimes being stubborn is really good. So everything is a little bit of both. Maybe not everything. Most things are a little bit of both. And it really depends upon which way you choose to utilize it to serve you. If the answer is, does this serve me? Does this help me? That's better than good or bad. It failed. Does that serve me? Well, what can I get out of that failure? Oh, I can get this, I can get this, I can get this, I can get this. Because there's an ending between it was bad. Okay, where do we go from there? So I live life with that mindset of, okay, what can I learn? What can I do better? Where can I grow? What is this trying to teach me? This has happened 3 times now. What's going on that I keep having relationships where this issue keeps coming up? What am I doing to create this for myself? There's also my belief that we create our life. We create our thought process. We create our experiential. We largely create our reality of what we can control, but I can't control anything beyond me. I determine how I engage, but I'm going to try to utilize all that I can of who I am and my experiences to help me. And saying I failed, okay, but what now? There's still a what now versus that's it, you're a failure. I don't know. I don't want to be 59 and say Heather's a failure. I want to be 59 and say, like, watch out, world. I've learned so much. Look what's ahead. And I will fail a billion times, but awesome, because I'll never do it again, hopefully. And I'll learn a lot.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up, Paul? The biggest, I think, obstacle I deal with entrepreneurs is the fear of failure, and I'm failing at this. And it just seems like they can't understand the fact that I fail every day because I'm always trying different things. And the only way I've had huge breakthroughs in my business was by trying something and trying something, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, it was this easy to just do this thing over here with a slight tweak. So if you're not constantly failing because you're not constantly trying, I think that's the only failure there is, because if you're not trying, you're never going to succeed.
100%. I had a sales job, and they said, if you don't hear several no's, you're not doing your job. He also said, and this you might wobble with, it was a hard, cold sales job. So I'll own that. And I had a complaint from someone who said I pushed too hard. And I got called into the boss's office, and he sat me down, and I was nervous because the person said, like, I wouldn't stop. And he looked at me and he said, Heather, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to take it deep. I'm glad I got that phone call. And I'm like, you're glad someone doesn't like me and didn't buy the product? He goes, let me help you out. You tried your hardest. You're a salesperson. You weren't disrespectful. You just kept trying to overcome. And I was really good. But my viewpoint was, let me over I'll give you this because this will help. My response wasn't, I'm not listening to your no. My response was, let me help you understand how this can totally help you. And that no doesn't have to be a no. When your salespeople see it from that viewpoint, not you have rejected me, but you've given me the opportunity to show you something that maybe you're not aware of, then they become the helper. And to me, that's the key so much to life and sales. Not, I'm not listening to what you say, but I am listening to what you say. And this is exactly why this program can help you, because it's going to save you $10,000 in SEO because of blah, 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 blah. But they're making it too personal. And their focus is on, I'm scared, instead of, okay, well, sure, we all are. However, what does the customer need? How are you coming through for the customer? That's a salesperson's job, whether they're scared or not. Like, do I really trust my product? Do I really trust my knowledge of the product? And do I realize that some people are going to completely just say no? I have people on the phone where I don't. Sometimes I say, okay, so when are you free next week? And sometimes I say, think about it. Go shop a bunch of therapists, and they'll say, oh, I want a book. I'm like, okay, great. But sometimes I don't feel like they have decided completely, and I'm going to honor that. Okay, I'm not the best therapist for everybody. That's okay. I'm going to get the next one. So to me, it would be shifting their viewpoint of it being personal and taking it to, you're missing the key, which is what's the information that individual needs to really be sold, if they are to be sold. And there are some people who will say no. I've been that person. I went to a timeshare. Yeah. There was no way I was buying. Guess what? I walked out. I did not buy. It wasn't the salesperson. The salesperson was awesome. I was not going to buy.
Here's the best story I've ever heard about no's. About 18, 19 years ago, I was out doing cold calls with a gentleman up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And he knew in his head that for every 10 doors he could walk into, 9 people would say no, but 1 person would talk to him. And we just hit 7 no's in a row. And he walks in the door, and this receptionist there, and he said, would you just say no? And she said, excuse me? He goes, just say no. And she said, what are you talking about? What's wrong with you? And he said, well, 7 or 8 people just said no to me in a row. I want you to say no, because I know then the next person is going to talk to me, and I'm going to be able to help them with their business. And she said, I'm not going to say no. What can you do for my business? So sometimes asking for the no.
Because he was so positive of the last sale.
That's an interesting one. So would you say that the only failure is when we don't understand or are aware of the lesson that is being taught by the challenge in front of us? That would be the only real failure?
I would say yes and no, but I'd also say that's not a failure, because then you're realizing something.
Right.
Wow, I'm really not at a place where I'm going to let myself succeed. Oh, wow. What is that? So to me, there really isn't any failure, because a failure is a message of, do I choose to let this be my continual here on out, or am I going to change it right now?
Mm-hmm. So, what are your thoughts on this? And Glenn has heard this before because we have focused on job interviews and career advice and job seekers and whatnot. But I often tell the clients who do come to me for some work in that area how to answer that question. Well, what is your greatest weakness? Which I actually think is really a tripwire question to get when you go on an interview.
Mhm.
But I often will question a client and say, well, what's your greatest strength?
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
they'll tell me what their greatest strength is. I go, what if you had too much of that strength? How would it hurt you? What is the flip side of being too organized? What is that? Is that a perfectionist? All right. Well, then just take your strength and just say, but if I'm too much like this, I can be like that. It shows an interesting awareness. And I really think most people look at me like, I don't think that's going to work. I don't think it's going to work. But what are your thoughts, Heather?
Well, I love that because I do think everything is both. Organization is wonderful, but it can turn into OCD, and then it's not necessarily. And sometimes what we think is I think what is our weakness is actually the place where we've got the most room to grow. So if we're not fearful of it and we allow ourselves to express it in whatever way we're willing to, then it opens up the door for us to grow. I learned this a lot when my husband died. Um, for some reason, I felt the need to write about it. And so on Facebook, I would write about what I was feeling. And it was very raw and it was very vulnerable and it was very open. And for some reason, I just felt like it was what I was supposed to do. I had so many people reach out to me and say, I cannot believe you've been so vulnerable. I cannot believe you have shared the feelings I have had forever. And then I realized, oh, wow, the place where I feel the most fearful, the place where I feel the most raw and vulnerable is actually the place for me to connect the most deeply. If I say to you, I'm a great therapist, and I think I am, awesome, but it doesn't create much. I had an incredible opportunity with a couple. And at the end of the first session, the gentleman said to me, I do not like you. And I went, oh. And I thought, think. And then I came back to him and I said, well, thank God you didn't come to me to be my friend. And you said that what I have brought has helped you tremendously. So I'll see you next week. And at the end of the fourth session, he said to me, I kind of like you a little bit. And I wanted to say, you're such an ass, but I didn't. That would have been my non-therapist voice. But I said, thank you. And I kind of like you a little bit too. But I am so grateful to that man. My role as a therapist is not for you to like me. My role as a therapist is to challenge you, support you, encourage you, stretch you, open up your mind. That gentleman helped me push myself so much further than I ever would have without that very painful encounter, because that opened up the door. And I'll tell people, like, you're not going to like what I'm going to say, but you're going to like where we're going to go. Or how much do you trust me? Like, I got to give you a doozy right now. It's made me very ballsy with people who can handle it. So I'm incredibly grateful for that vulnerable moment. There's a Jen Gottlieb, I think is her name. And what she says is something like, your messes are your miracles, something like that. She's writing a book about that. Like, your messes are your biggest moment. Your messes are your message. That's it. Your messes are your message.
Okay.
And it's true. The places where we have the hardest time is really where we have the best opportunity to share.
I
she's
like
in
that
New York.
story.
We can't trust anybody from New York.
Right.
Yeah.
I like the story.
Very successful.
I like the story about the was it a husband and wife you said?
Yeah.
the husband. Yeah, it sounds like you were okay with him liking you like vanilla, but there was no way you had to have him like you like Rocky Road.
And I was even okay with him not liking me at all, as long as he really grew and changed. Most people like me. I think I'm a pretty likable person, but it was really good for me to realize I can still work with someone who absolutely doesn't. And it also showed me I can work with someone who I don't particularly like. He wasn't he wasn't somebody that I'd say, "Oh my gosh, I love working with him because he's such an incredible person. He makes me feel so good." And I can't even say I loved working with him because it was really hard, but I loved the work that came out of it because it was
Right.
so honest. Like there was no BS with him because he was just like, I'm going to tell you. And
Right.
so it got us to a very deep, clear, precise place, which was wonderful.
But then you
Now
take
let me
that
go ahead.
perspective. I'm sorry, Glenn, just one more. You take that perspective and then you give it to your clients in the future. So it's
Yeah.
really, it's interesting how when we get challenged, again, every challenge is an opportunity.
There are no failures.
Now let's go back to you said, there are different things, whether it be the caregiver, something in your adolescence, in your teens, in your early adulthood or whatever, that turns on that little voice in the back of your head that says, you can't tell people about this because you're not good enough. This happens, so you're not good enough. So how do you help people forgive themselves for these things? And I ask that because as a 50-plus-year-old man, I got a tattoo on my arm last year. There was an hourglass and a compass colliding to remind myself I'm not always the wrong place at the wrong time or the right place at the right time. It's somewhere in between there. Just relax. So how do you help people forgive themselves for things that have happened in their past?
Part of it is really owning that their experience wasn't completely their choice. Our childhood, our family, our environment, our health, our socioeconomic, we came into this life, whether we chose it beforehand or not, we came into this life and that then therefore shapes us. My mom was a paranoid schizophrenic. And so I didn't have a real good sense of who I was or what I thought or what I felt, because my role, I believed, was just try to like have things be calm, have things be mellow, help mom so she doesn't go into an episode. So it's taken a long time for me to actually realize, oh, wow, I get to be my own person. I get to have my own thoughts and feelings. My role isn't here to just take care of the world. But there's a place of saying your childhood, your history was what it was. But what is your, and a lot of love and respect and compassion for that. But then also, but what is your intention? I grew up very much a people pleaser, very much, very, very anxious attachment. Absolutely. Very, very much let me like sacrifice myself for everyone else. But when I saw that and looked at it, I thought, well, what was my intention? Well, my intention was to love people. My intention was to help people in their journey. What was the negative downside of that? I really didn't care for myself. I really didn't take care of myself. So there's a place of cleaning that up. My intentions in my head were good. But when I looked at them deeper, I thought, oh, well, there's actually a manipulation there because I'm actually trying to be who you want me to be so you'll like me, so I feel secure within myself. Ugh, what's that? So there's a place of, I'm going to love that little me who's scared and worried and fearful, because I'm still 3 at times. That little girl on the bed sobbing because no one's coming to love her and hug her. That's still me at moments. And then say, I love you. I love you. But how do I take care of myself now that I'm a 59-year-old woman? Let me wrap my arms around me. Let me ask for a hug. I don't have to have that complete same experience that I had at 3 when I couldn't do anything differently. So once again, it's empowering the person to realize this was your history. And some people have horrific histories and terrible wreckage because of that, and scars because of that. And I have some clients who will never really be healthy, no matter how much work I do with them. Their childhoods were so horrific that for them to be able to interact and hold a job and take care of themselves is a miracle in its own self. And so there's a place of honoring, well, what was your experience and what was your intention behind it? And where is that short circuiting who you are now and who you want to be? We are as we feel we need to be because of that situation. And then we tend to bring that into all our others. But there's a place, if it's not the same relationship, you don't necessarily need to interact in the same way. I don't need to walk into my house and be like, hey. But as a kid, I did, because whatever room mom was in determined, okay, we might have an okay night, or uh-oh, or oh God, take me now. I don't have to do that as an adult because I don't live with someone who's as unstable.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the place to realize that, like, I don't need to live as I lived then, because I'm not in that same reality now, because I have changed my life to not choose that for myself going forward.
Paul, I think we're going to have to invite Heather back for like a 3-hour show, because I've got like 40 more questions, but we're running out of time.
I'd love to.
I know. We're a little short on time. We do try to end at the hour and keep people coming back for more. So Heather, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you very much. If anyone would want to reach out and contact you, what's the best way to do so?
Probably my website. So my website is drheatherbrowne.com, DRHEATHER, BROWNE.com. And I've got newsletter, I've got workshops, I've got online course. There's lots of ways to interact with me there. All my social media is on there as well.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's been a great episode. Everyone, we'll see you back same time, same channels next week. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.